Hey everyone, here we are, Module 4. We aren't in class this week, so I wanted to make sure we didn't get too far behind. So here we are, we're going to talk about storytelling and filmmaking in this particular week. In the module, you need to make your way through every single page in the module. You need to read everything within each module because there's a lot of stuff that you need to do, right? We're going to have these lecture videos in the module. There's going to be contextual videos about storytelling in the module. There's going to be these story examples, like plot point markers in a story or in a cinema, in a film, that there's a whole page on those as well. You want to watch all of those videos. Then there's also going to be a feature film, A Quiet Place, that you need to watch. We would be watching that in class in its entirety, so you need to sit down and watch it. And then there's a movie analysis that you have to do, breaking down the plot points and the story elements for the film A Quiet Place. And you'll need to submit it in Canvas. So this is all stuff that needs to get done this particular week. You need to do it as though you were in class, and then then you'll be all dialed in and ready to go. At some point, you're going to be referencing all this stuff that we cover in this module to write a little film, to write a project, and so you're going to make sure you have all that information. So let's get to it. We're talking about story in filmmaking this week. So here's a quote from Steven Spielberg. People have forgotten how to tell a story. Stories don't have a middle or an end anymore. They usually have a beginning that never stops beginning, right? And Steven Spielberg's made a lot of films, starting with classics like Jaws, which is in the 70s, and he's still making relevant work today. So he's somebody who's earned the right to critique filmmaking and filmmakers that are working today. So where we're going to start? We're going to start with a log line. And as you're planning your film, the first thing you want to do is, what is it, right? What is this story that we're doing? And you're going to have to make a pitch to somebody to give you money to make this movie, and it usually starts with the log line, okay? So a log line is a brief, usually a one-sentence summary of your show or the film or a book, whatever it is, right? And it states the central conflict of the story, often providing both a synopsis of the story plot and an emotional hook to stimulate interest, right? Oftentimes, if you're in a pitch meeting, the first place you're going is to that log line, and if you don't hook them with the log line, they'll probably move on, stop the meeting, and get to their next meeting. So your log line has to be well thought out and give a lot of information, but really brief, okay? So here's a couple examples. A Las Vegas set comedy centered around three groomsmen who lose their about-to-be-wed buddy during their drunken misadventures, then must retrace their steps in order to find him. Okay, so that is from The Hangover. That's a log line from that. Another one right here. Two imprisoned men bond over a number of years, finding a solace and an eventual redemption through acts of common decency. Okay, this one is from Shawshank Redemption, which is a classic piece of cinema. On some lists, this is the best film ever made. The writing of this story, fantastic. Okay, the dialogue in the film, top notch. The acting, the performances, top notch. Cinematography, fantastic. It's edited well. The timing and the pacing. It's just a well done, complete piece of cinema. If you haven't seen it, you should. If you're into writing, you should pay attention to how the story gets told. It's a fantastic story with a lot of twists and turns. Great stuff. Check it out. Next, we're going to move on to character. And you see I got two characters down there at the bottom. We have Walter White, which is a character from Breaking Bad. He's the protagonist. And then we have Grindelwald, who is an antagonist from the Fantastic Beasts series. So we'll talk a little bit more about them in a second. One of the things is your characters are going to be taking us on a journey. Like, that's who we're following in your stories, right? And you need to know them inside and out if you're going to develop and tell a quality story, right? How they deal with everything should be known when it comes to who these people are, so that you have an understanding of how they will react to the situations that you put them in the film. Okay, so you need to create details, right? Their attitudes, their values, their emotions, right? What they think about things. You need to develop a backstory for them. You need to work on their physiology, so their body language, how they carry themselves. Do they have any tics? How do they act? How do they walk? What's their body language like? You want a sociology about them, like you want to know how they interact with people and how they act in groups. And you want to know what their psychology is, like what's their belief system? What's their personality like? What were their parents like? What were their siblings like? How do they respond to coworkers? Do they have a lot of friends or not very many? Have they had significant others or not? Or there's all kinds of things you can explore, right? Just think about your life and all the things you've been through and all the experiences you've had. That's what this character should have, even though they're a fictional thing, right? So you have to think about all that and develop it, and that's what professional screenwriters are doing, right? And then you want to think about putting your characters in different situations in your mind as you're developing your story, and think about how your character would react in that situation. Not how you would react, how they would react. Not how the best, perfect, most amazing superhero of a protagonist would react to things. How would your character react, right? So it's very important that you understand who your character is. Okay? And a complete character often is made up of, they have an external conflict, some kind of opposing force that's kind of they're in conflict with or creating an issue with in the movie, right? And we'll talk a little bit about conflict in story, but also having an internal conflict, having something within them that they're battling, and that's more of a psychological type thing, or an emotional type thing that they have to struggle with to be successful and reach this goal, right? Those are very well developed, interesting characters that people like to watch, right? In Breaking Bad, this guy is just a drug cartel leader, an American drug cartel leader, if you just look at it on the surface. But how that story gets started is Walter White is a middle class or lower middle class teacher, high school chemistry teacher, and he finds out he has a terminal illness. And he's really worried about his family. Like, he doesn't have a big life insurance policy. He can't leave his family a bunch of money. They're kind of struggling as it is. They have a special needs child in the home. And he's like really worried about how they're going to take care of themselves when he's gone, right? So he actually gets into making meth as a way to generate a whole bunch of cash really quickly so that he can take care of his family. So it actually starts in a very good place, and there's a lot going on in the psychology about why he chooses to do what he does, and then it changes and develops, and he changes and develops as the series goes on. I think it goes like 6 or 8 seasons or something like that, right? Grindelwald, he's actually more of a protagonist in the Fantastic Beasts series, but he actually comes from a place of he's got good intentions, right? He's tired of people with magic having to hide and stay away from and not let their powers be known to the average person, right? He's tired of living in secret and hiding his powers and not being able to use them in front of the commoner, kind of thing, right? And so it's really about he's frustrated with the suppression of his kind, right? Which is actually a pretty universal thing. And he just goes about trying to solve that problem in a bad way, right? So the guy, if you break him down, isn't all that, he doesn't have bad intentions. He just goes about it in a very ruthless, terrible way, right? So you really have to have an understanding about who these people are, and you should be able to break them down and kind of explain what they're all about and why they're the way that they are. Okay, types of conflict, okay, man versus man. So that's having a protagonist. At the top of the page right there, you see 4 classic protagonists in cinema history, right? There is Darth Vader, who's a classic. You got Hannibal Lecter. Oh, I forget Jack Nicholson's name in The Shining. I forget his name, but he's a classic. He's kind of the protagonist and then turns into the antagonist, kind of an anti-hero. And then you have Heath Ledger as Joker in one of the Dark Knight films. Then there's also man versus nature. So a film like Twister, or a film like San Andreas, or a film like Armageddon, where a comet is going to come, or asteroid's going to come and destroy the Earth. Don't Look Up. I think that's global warming driven, right? So man versus nature, man versus society, right? So that's Malcolm X. It's in the reverse right there. I don't know why that is. But Malcolm X, man versus society. Any film about Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, I think we're still in the middle of Black History Month. So learning about those characters and what their struggles were. These weren't characters; these were actual real people. So learning about their struggles and what their life was like and what they were fighting for. That's man versus society, right? That's not anything else. And then you have man versus himself. People with internal struggles. That last photo is from A Star Is Born, the most recent version of A Star Is Born, with Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper is fighting to keep his career, like his record, into his livelihood, is he's a superstar, megastar musician, but he's getting a little older and his career is kind of dwindling, and he has to kind of grapple with that and kind of understand or kind of figure out who he's going to be after his career ends. But he's also dealing with addiction and some mental illness, and those are all internal conflicts, and that's all himself fighting against himself, right? And so thinking about those kinds of things as you're developing a character is extremely important if you're going to make a quality story. So think about the types of conflicts you can have. You can have multiple types of conflict within a story. It doesn't have to just be one type, right? But make sure that you're trying to think about what kind of conflict can you get in. Now, we're going to be talking about short filmmaking, so you have a little less time. You can't develop a whole bunch, but you can definitely focus on who my character is and what kind of conflict they're going to be dealing with. Now we're going to move on to storytelling, right? So the story is about somebody who we have some empathy towards. So again, creating a protagonist that we can relate to on some level. Doesn't have to be, they can be a good person or a bad person. Again, Walter White is the protagonist of Breaking Bad, and we can't always agree with him. We can't always understand why he does what he does, but they're on that basic level of him just trying to find a way to support his family. People can relate to that, right? See what we hit here. This somebody wants something very badly. So our protagonist has to have a goal that they're trying to reach. Okay, that's number 2. And this goal must be difficult, but definitely has to be possible. It can't be an impossible goal to achieve, right? So you want to make sure that that's pretty clear in a short film. What are we trying to get to? We don't have much time, so we got to get to it pretty quick. But we need to know who this character is. We want to make sure that we have empathy towards this main character. And whatever there's something, they want something badly, and they're going to be able, it's something that's attainable. Okay? And the story accomplishes maximum emotional impact and audience connection. Now, what that means is, what does the audience know and when do they know it? Okay? So sometimes the audience knows something that a character doesn't know. And so we're like, oh, when are they going to find out? Or there's somebody hiding around that corner or something like that, right? Sometimes the characters have information that we don't know yet, and it gets revealed to us in little pieces. You have to figure out how to kind of weave that little storyline so that it keeps the audience connected, right? And that's probably the most difficult piece of the whole puzzle, right? Making it so that the audience stays engaged based on how we're giving information and who we're giving the information through on screen, okay? And finally, the story must come to a satisfactory ending. It doesn't have to be a happy ending. It's just you have to answer all the questions that you laid out. You can't just leave it open-ended and like, oh man, we don't know what happened kind of thing.